All right, Alex Leslie, I'm going to bring him in from ATRI. Alex, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let me read a little bit here. I got some for you. It says, your role encompasses data science, statistics, survey design, research, technical writing, and numerous avenues of public outreach. Now, what does all that truly mean, Alex? What does all that truly mean?
Well, it means that I can do just about anything.
Naturally, we're all How about that plane jump? How about that plane jump we saw earlier? You in for that?
Not sure about that one. Keep me on the ground, I think.
Okay, so what is it? What does a research analyst at ATRI truly do? Now, let's go through that.
Well, at ATRI, we're just about the data, right? We're not trying to sell you anything. We're not trying to catch anyone. We're not trying to put you on lists. We're all about working with the data, and that means going out to carriers, doing research on our own, collecting survey information. We do it all. We cover all kinds of topics, whether it's operational costs, which is what we're working on right now, or whether it's something like the report we just published on insurance in the trucking industry. We've got a really great report on electric vehicles coming out right now as well. So we cover the full gambit, and that means we do a little bit of everything. Again, not Red Bull or vodka fuel.
That's pretty funny. And let me ask you, so as you talk about it, I know the reason we brought you on, we're going to talk a little bit about the annual report that you've got coming out. What is it what is it we're going to talk about today a little bit?
Yeah, every year ATRI publishes its operational costs of trucking report, and this is the best benchmarking tool out there. As you guys know, I'm sure you got to know your costs, and especially in an environment like this where costs are changing so quickly, you got to know what your peers are paying too in order to understand whether your costs are sort of on point. Again, whether you've got one truck or whether you've got 1,000 trucks, and that's really what this report and this data effort that we've got going right now is all about, because all of our data comes from carriers. We don't estimate, we don't guess around, we get it directly and confidentially from fleets themselves.
Well, and you mentioned that, so who is eligible to participate, and how do you protect their identity?
Yeah, any motor carrier, whether it's, again, an owner-operator, whether you've got 3-4 trucks or, up to, you name it, however many trucks you've got. Anyone's eligible to participate. You don't need to be a member of a trucking association. You don't need to have done it before. Heck, you could be Canadian even. We like Canadians. So it's really wide open.
Hey, question for you on that, So here we go. So do you separate that out between the independent contractors and the company trucks when you're looking at the final report when it comes out?
Yeah, we do a lot of different breakdowns. Fleet size is one of the most important ones that we put those owner-operators or people with 2-3 trucks in their own group, and we have other different categories because the costs, as you guys I'm sure know, change pretty drastically depending on what your fleet size looks like. And we also break things down by sector too, so that when you read our report, which any of you can do, our research is all public, it's all free. You'll be able to find, again, where you fall, not just sort of the broad picture. We've got that too, certainly, but also more targeted. And this year, actually, we've introduced a sort of new perk of participating in our ops cost research. We have this customized carrier-specific report that directly compares your fleet's costs in the key cost centers with those just of peer carriers, so similar size, same sector. And that was because we had a lot of fleets that were saying, this report is really useful, but maybe we don't have the in-house data analytics people that sort of connect some of those dots for us. So we added this to help get it even more specific, so you can see exactly where you fall.
Yeah, from a carrier perspective, great information. You always want to know how you're doing compared to your peers of your size. Some challenges that we've seen, is the pricing, especially this year. as we've seen, part shortages and all of that, we've really seen an increase. And one thing that I'm really curious about on this report is going to be, so many of us, I think a lot of us, we assume that's just the price because there's a price shortage. And now we're going to see what our peers were paying. And a question on that same thing. So the peer group that has their own shop, do we also get to see them as well?
We don't currently have it split out by do you have your own shop versus no. Certainly maintenance and repair costs, though, are one of the factors that we track. And that's something that, especially with this customized report, too, you'll be able to see where in the spectrum of costs you fall, which will help sort of identify that factor without naming it outright. We don't currently collect it.
And why is this tool the best benchmark to demonstrate these costs? I'm just curious as to other ways. Why this one?
Well, we've got a couple reasons. For one, we've been running this for a very long time, so we have over a decade's worth of data behind it to help give those trend lines. Another good reason is that we cover all sectors of the industry. So obviously you're looking for where you fall, but we cross lines sometimes, and sometimes it's useful to know what costs look like in some of those cost centers, across the board as well. So whoever you are, we've got you covered. We also have a lot of breadth in the data that we include in this report. Just this year, for example, we've added questions about turnover rate and about profit margins even. So the wealth of data that we have, again, all confidential, but the wealth of data that we have just really covers a full spectrum of what you need to know if you're operating a fleet. And that combined, of course, with the fact that it's freely accessible, publicly available. If you go to truckingresearch.org right now, you can get last year's report in 5 seconds. And so that's a priority for us. Again, we're not trying to sell you anything. We're trying to make the industry better.
Yeah, so I was looking at that earlier today, and I have it pulled up here, and I like what you guys are measuring. Among the for-hire fleet metrics being requested by ATRI are driver pay, fuel cost, I love this part, insurance premium, lease and purchase payments. And I'm going to tell you, we have seen a major change in those this year over, especially 2 years ago, but even over last year. So it's a great benchmark to know, what you're seeing. That insurance on its own. And I'm going to throw something else out there that you're probably not doing. I'd be curious to see, on the captive insurance versus the non-captive. How many of these carriers have their own insurance, their own captive insurance, and do they follow their own different trend lines as well, as opposed to, say, the open market carriers? I'm always out there making, giving you data scientists things to do, right?
Yeah, we actually do have some of that data. Well, first let me say, in our ops cost report, we do also track out-of-pocket costs, out-of-pocket incident costs. And so we can combine that with premium costs to get a sort of more well-rounded, holistic sense of that cost of risk, which is really helpful. But we do actually track some of that captive information in a report that we published a couple months ago on the impacts of rising insurance costs. We found that actually captive participation it's a rather low, actually, but among fleets of a certain size is where you really see it jump up. What we call medium or 25 to 100 truck fleets is where it's most popular. Once you get a bit larger than that, the trends tend to shift towards self-insured retentions. But you might want to check that report out if that's something you're interested in. Certainly, the numbers they're on the rise. They hurt a little bit, but there's good stuff in that report too.
And as we talk about this, I think it's very important that we understand this is all voluntary data that's given, right? You don't actually go and hunt the data. It's only done. So go over it with me. Why it's so important for carriers and people and home and owner operator? Why is it so important that they participate in this study?
Yeah, exactly like you said. We don't have a pay-to-play model. We don't charge thousands of dollars for each report, and then give you a free one at the end or something like that. So we rely on the goodwill of the trucking industry, and we've had that goodwill at ATRI. Again, we've been running this report for over a decade. Well trusted. We have a lot of returning fleets every year. But basically, it comes down to the more participants we get, the better our data is. Every carrier that contributes, they're able to get more information from us. They make our data better in return. So we really depend on that. And again, we've had a good track record with it so far. But we're always out there looking for new fleets, looking for new participants, and we're always happy to walk anyone through the process or any help along the way.
If you had to, and as we talk about this, what are some of the key takeaways that you probably that was most shocking? But I know that you go through the data, so I don't necessarily know that you're shocked. But what are some of the genuine key takeaways that you've learned from this annual report in the past that you weren't aware of going forward?
It's really interesting to watch the trends, Dave. The equipment cost trends have really been, obviously in this last year and a half, 2 years, they've been, pretty wild. But even before that, in the decade from about 2010 to 2020, the cost of equipment doubled. And that's, to me, a really incredible trend line. Again, that's before we're talking about electric vehicles. That's before we're talking about pandemic shortages. So to me, that's one of the biggest things I'm watching in terms of how are we as an industry going to respond to that higher cost, and how's that going to impact the way we use vehicles, how we manage our costs on the whole. That's going to be the really big challenge, of course, with costs going up across the board right now. Obviously, driver pay, driver benefits, insurance, but even things like tire costs. We're looking at potentially a rubber shortage here. So it's interesting to see how that balance of costs weighs out. It's been fairly consistent, but we're seeing, again, some changes leading towards higher equipment especially. But it's going to be really interesting to see this year's report, especially with, again, how all over the place those costs have been. And that's where our customized report, I think, is going to be really useful for fleets that do choose to participate.
In this cost, and as we talk about it, what's the deadline for this report? If you want to get involved in this report, or if you want to add to the data, or you want to give your data, what's the deadline to go in and get and do this report?
Yeah, right now we've got a May 14th deadline for finishing, so it's still several weeks away. But if you get started and you need a little bit more time on the end, drop us a line, and we can help you through that. But the deadline right now is May 14th. And I will say that, again, you can complete this on our website, truckingresearch.org. And if you've got your costs handy, you can complete this in 20 minutes. It may take longer if you're not used to some of the questions, but again, we're on hand to help with any of that if you need it.
And if we do need to ask for help, do we just email you guys directly? Do we call, or what do we do to ask for a little guidance, a little walking, a little hand-in-hand guide through this study that you say takes 20 minutes? We're already talking about it, and I'm already feeling like this is a weekend project. but if you did need a little help, what do we do? How do we get to it?
Yeah, we've got some help posted on our website. You can also email me directly, Leslie, ALESLIE, at trucking.org. That's a quick way to get in touch, help iron out anything. And if there's anything that, maybe you don't have immediately on hand, or if you're not sure that you collect certain bits of information, you can move right along. Some data is better than no data, we always say.
So basically participate, right? You're basically saying if you get a chance, jump on to the ATRI's website, get out there, add to the data, add to the ability to collect some of this data, because it's only going to benefit everyone in the industry. Every single person out there that takes the time to go out and retrieve this report that you get is going to get some kind of benefit from it, understanding what's been going on. And this report, you've had, 10 years, right? You've compiled this report over the last 10 years is how this has been going, and we can see some of those move together. So it's really, really beneficial if you get involved, because I think if you go and give the data, you're going to want to look at the data, right? Isn't that kind of how it works?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you know where you fall.
Hey, you're in luck, Alex, because we're going to have Dave and two of your closest friends, Dave, talk a little bit real quick and just go out there to our listeners and say, go to the website, fill it out. We need better information. Data is key. We can't measure without the best data. So get involved in your industry, trucking companies, independent contractors. Pay attention, get involved, go to the website. Dave, I need you and your two best friends to help us out. I want the best participation ever. Y'all help us out here.
Hey, everybody, let me just tell you right now, it doesn't matter if you're a company guy. It doesn't matter if you're an owner-operator. It doesn't matter if you're a large or small carrier. I'm telling you right now, you out there, you right there, you need to go in. There's something at ATRI that will benefit you if you're in this industry, but you got to get involved. They want to know, they want to hear from drivers. They want to hear from owner-operators. They want to hear from carriers. They want to hear from insurers. If you're in this industry, you have a voice, and the best place to be heard is at ATRI. Am I right, Alex?
That's right, absolutely.
Yeah, I tried to sell that for you.
You sold it really well. Hey, I'm impressed. You and your two best friends.
Yeah. Those are my only friends, Alex. Those are some of my only friends. But you know what? We all like each other, every single one of us. And as we talk about it, doing this and getting online, how have you've been at ATRI how long now?
About a year.
Yeah, and in that time that you've got, I'll tell you what I've really come to understand about ATRI, and I really haven't learned much. I learned it here on this show and in some of the interviews. It's pretty incredible how everybody in both government and the industry and how what your data does do to affect change. And y'all aren't out there y'all aren't doing anything to make it change. You're just presenting the information, and it's making a change.
Yeah, we're out there working the data. We give that publicly, availably, freely to help other people make those decisions. And again, like you said, we have government agencies, DOT, FMCSA use our data when they're making decisions. Carriers use our data. Even stuff like with this operational cost report, we know that shippers use it. We know that bankers, when a carrier goes to get a loan, they consult this report sometimes. So the breadth of usage is really huge. And again, it's because there really is that need for good data, accessible data that is presented fairly and openly.
Alex, I do appreciate you coming on. And you know what? When we have this report come out and we get it to see it later on next month, and when y'all do compile it and gather it, I'd like for you to come on back on and maybe speak to some of the data points that you have, and maybe go through the report here online. And let's talk about it again after it comes out, and let's see where we're at the end of that. Does that sound like agreeable to you?
It'd be my pleasure. There'll be plenty to talk about.
All right, fantastic. All right, and I appreciate you coming on. If anybody wants to reach out to you, get a hold of you, one more time, I want you to tell them, how do they reach out to you?
You can go to truckingresearch.org, or you can email me yourself at aleslie, ALESLIE, at trucking.org.
All right, I appreciate it. All right, and before you get out of here, we ask all our guests to say who they are, where they work for, and that you are watching BCB Live, the safest station in the nation. Can you do that for me real quick?
I can do it. This is Alex Leslie from the American Transportation Research Institute, and you've been watching BCB Live, the safest station in the nation.